GoldenEye gave us a new Bond, a fallen 006, and some of the most unforgettable characters of the franchise. 31 years later, you may barely recognize some of them. Some survived cancer and painful public heartbreak, while several familiar faces are sadly gone. Here's where the GoldenEye cast is in 2026. Desmond Llewellyn as QQ was MI6's brilliant gadget master, the man who equipped Bond with everything from hidden weapons to modified cars, and then grumpily reminded him to return each invention in one piece. Desmond Llewellyn was already 81 when GoldenEye was released, although by then he had been playing the character for more than 3 decades, becoming one of the longest-serving and most familiar faces in the Bond franchise. Remarkably, Llewellyn had not been the obvious choice when he first auditioned for Q. There were concerns over his Welsh accent, but his gentlemanly manner, dry humor, and wonderfully irritated chemistry with Bond eventually made him almost impossible to replace. The great irony was that the man audiences knew as a technological genius was nothing like Q at home. Llewellyn openly admitted that he knew very little about technology and could struggle with ordinary household gadgets. During his later years, another part of his life became increasingly important. Llewellyn had married Pamela Mary Pantlin in 1938, and their marriage lasted for more than 6 decades. As Pamela developed Alzheimer's disease, he devoted much of his time to caring for her, a quiet side of the actor far removed from the exploding pens, trick cars, and playful arguments with 007. Then came a tragically sudden ending. On December 19, 1999, Llewellyn was driving home from a book signing event when his car was involved in a head-on collision in East Sussex. He later died from his injuries at the age of 85. Pamela died in 2001, 2 years after her husband, bringing to an end a marriage that had endured for more than 60 years. Yet for generations of Bond fans, one image of Llewellyn remains timeless. Q standing behind his latest invention, patiently waiting for James Bond to stop playing with it. Judi Dench as MM was the head of MI6, Bond's superior, and one of the few people powerful enough to challenge him without hesitation. Judi Dench was 60 when GoldenEye arrived in 1995, becoming the first woman to play M in the Bond film series. It was a striking change for a franchise that had spent more than 3 decades largely built around a traditionally masculine world. There were doubts about how a female M would fit opposite the famously womanizing Bond, but Dench answered them almost immediately. In one of GoldenEye's most memorable scenes, M dismisses Bond as a sexist, misogynist dinosaur and a relic of the Cold War. With that confrontation, Dench established that this M would neither admire Bond nor be intimidated by him. Instead of weakening the character, the change gave Bond an authority figure capable of challenging everything he represented. Away from the screen, Dench endured a far more personal loss. She had been married to actor Michael Williams for 30 years when he died from lung cancer in 2001. His death devastated her, and she has spoken openly over the years about the enormous place he occupied in her life and the difficulty of adjusting to life without him. Today, at 91, Dench faces a very different challenge. Age-related macular degeneration has severely damaged her eyesight, leaving her unable to read scripts in the traditional way and increasingly dependent on others to help her learn lines and navigate daily life. Her screen appearances have consequently become far less frequent. Robbie Coltrane as Valentin Zukovsky. Valentin Zukovsky, the former KGB agent who reinvented himself as a Russian crime boss, was only a supporting character in GoldenEye. Yet at 45, Robbie Coltrane gave him such a memorable mixture of menace, sarcasm, and humor that the filmmakers brought him back 4 years later for The World Is Not Enough, giving Zukovsky a much larger place in the Bond world than originally expected. But despite that success, Coltrane's imposing size often worked against him. For years, his large frame meant he was frequently pushed toward comic roles or oversized, intimidating characters. He eventually proved there was far more to him with his acclaimed performance as criminal psychologist Dr. Eddie Fitzgerald in Cracker, which helped him win 3 consecutive BAFTA TV awards. Then came the role that made him beloved around the world, Rubeus Hagrid, whom he played throughout all 8 Harry Potter films. His private life had its own difficulties. Coltrane married Rona Gemmell in 1999, and they had 2 children, but the couple separated in 2003 and later divorced. His greatest physical struggle came toward the end of his life. Severe osteoarthritis left him in constant pain as the cartilage in his knees deteriorated, and by 2019, he was frequently using a wheelchair while waiting for surgery. On October 14, 2022, Robbie Coltrane died in a hospital in Scotland at the age of 72. His death certificate recorded multiple organ failure, with sepsis, a lower respiratory tract infection, and heart block among the conditions involved. It brought to an end the career of one of Britain's most distinctive character actors, a man who could be threatening enough to face James Bond and warm enough to become Hagrid to an entire generation. Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. Few people realize that Pierce Brosnan almost became James Bond in 1986, nearly a decade before he finally put on the tuxedo in GoldenEye. His commitment to the television series Remington Steele ultimately prevented him from taking the role, and Timothy Dalton became 007 instead. So when Bond finally came back to Brosnan at 42, the pressure was enormous. GoldenEye arrived after a 6-year gap between Bond films, in a world where the Cold War that had shaped 007 was already over, and there were serious questions about whether Bond could still survive. Brosnan answered them with GoldenEye. The film successfully introduced Bond to a new generation, and Brosnan returned for 3 more adventures as 007. He later moved far beyond the character with films including The Thomas Crown Affair, Mamma Mia, and The Ghost Rider. In 2003, he was also awarded an honorary OBE for his contribution to the British film industry. But behind that extraordinary success were 2 devastating losses. Brosnan's first wife, actress Cassandra Harris, died from ovarian cancer in 1991. More than 2 decades later, the same disease struck his family again when his daughter Charlotte, Harris's daughter whom Brosnan had adopted, died from ovarian cancer in 2013. She was only 41, leaving Brosnan to endure the same kind of loss for a second time. In 2026, Pierce Brosnan is 73 and has found lasting stability with his second wife, journalist and environmentalist Keely Shea Brosnan, whom he married in 2001. Away from acting, painting has become an important part of his life, while environmental causes have long remained close to the couple. He also continues to appear in films rather than retiring completely. Even a minor legal episode at Yellowstone National Park in 2023-24, after he entered a restricted thermal area, became little more than an unusual footnote in a life that has survived far greater challenges. Ravel Izyanov as MiG pilot. In GoldenEye, Ravel Izyanov appeared in the small role of a MiG fighter pilot. He was 33 at the time, but even in such a brief appearance, he brought something authentic to the part, shaped by the formal acting training he had received in Moscow before building a career far from his native Russia. Born in the Soviet Union, Izyanov studied acting in Moscow before eventually moving to Britain and later the United States during a period of enormous political change back home. His Russian accent and distinctive appearance proved both an advantage and a limitation. They opened doors in Western film and television, but also repeatedly typecast him as Russian military officers, spies, and criminals, roles that rarely showed the full range of his classical training. Despite that limitation, Izyanov quietly built an impressive career over several decades. He appeared in major productions including K-19, The Widowmaker and Transformers, Dark of the Moon, while television audiences may best remember him as Anatoly Kirkin in NCIS Los Angeles. Away from the cameras, he shared his life with his wife, Erica, while earning a reputation within the industry as a dependable and highly professional character actor. Behind those final years of work, however, Isyanov was fighting a private battle. He lived with cancer for approximately 17 months before dying at his home in Los Angeles on September 29, 2021, at the age of 59. His career never brought him the fame of Hollywood's biggest stars, but it lasted for decades. A quiet achievement for an actor who left Russia, started again in the West, and built a remarkably steady career from the kinds of supporting roles audiences often remember, even when they do not know the actor's name. Sean Bean as Alec Trevelyan/006. Alec Trevelyan, better known as Agent 006, was the main villain of GoldenEye, a former MI6 agent who betrayed his country and became the perfect personal enemy for James Bond. Sean Bean was 36 when he took on the role, giving the film a villain who could match Bond not only physically, but also through their shared history. Trevelyan would go on to become one of the most memorable villains of the modern Bond era. What many viewers may not know is that Bean had previously been considered for James Bond himself. Although he did not get the part, director Martin Campbell was impressed enough to cast him as Trevelyan. The character, originally conceived as an older man and former mentor figure, was rewritten as a younger former agent and contemporary of Bond, making their final confrontation far more personal. From there, Bean's career developed one of Hollywood's most famous running jokes. His characters seemed destined to die. From Boromir in The Lord of the Rings to Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, some of his biggest roles ended with his death on screen. His private life has been almost as complicated. Bean has married 5 times, to Deborah James, Melanie Hill, Abigail Cruttenden, Georgina Sutcliffe, and, since 2017, Ashley Moore. In 2012, he was arrested and questioned by police following allegations involving threatening communications and harassment connected to his 4th wife, Sutcliffe. The matter added an uncomfortable chapter to an already heavily publicized personal life. Now, Sean Bean is 67 and remains one of Britain's most recognizable character actors. Controversy followed him again in 2022 after comments questioning the use of intimacy coordinators on film sets drew criticism and debate. Yet after more than 4 decades in the profession, Bean remains widely respected for his acting, a performer who may have lost the chance to become James Bond, but turned Bond's betrayed friend into one of GoldenEye's most unforgettable characters. Gottfried John as Colonel General Arkady Grigorovich Urumov. Few would have expected one of director Rainer Werner Fassbinder's most distinctive actors to end up playing General Urumov in GoldenEye. Gottfried John was 53 when he became the authoritarian Russian officer who betrays his own country and joins the conspiracy at the heart of the film. Yet John gave Urumov something rarely expected from a Bond villain of that period, a sense that there was a complicated human being behind the uniform. When John moved into international productions, his greatest obstacles were not his acting ability, but language barriers and the danger of being reduced to stereotypical foreign villains. Drawing on the experience he had gained from acclaimed German productions such as Berlin Alexanderplatz, John made Urumov threatening without turning him into a cartoon. He later showed a very different side of his talent as Julius Caesar in Asterix and Obelix Take on Caesar, a performance that earned him a Bavarian Film Award for Best Supporting Actor. Away from the cameras, John lived a remarkably quiet life with his wife, Barbara John. While many actors around him became fixtures of the celebrity press, he largely avoided scandal and kept his private life separate from his work. On September 1, 2014, Gottfried John died near Munich, Germany, at the age of 72 after battling cancer. His international audiences may remember him best as the treacherous General Urumov, but his career stretched far beyond Bond, a respected German actor who managed to bring decades of serious dramatic experience into even the most commercial of films. Famke Janssen as Xenia Onatop. A deadly squeeze between her thighs was enough to transform a former Dutch model into one of the most unforgettable Bond women of the 1990s. Famke Janssen was 31 when she played Xenia Onatopp in GoldenEye, the dangerously seductive assassin who seemed to take as much pleasure in killing as Bond did in pursuing her. The performance immediately separated Janssen from the stereotype of a model simply trying her luck in Hollywood and turned Xenia into one of the most memorable female villains in Bond history. But that success also created a problem. The femme fatale image followed Janssen for years, and she deliberately searched for roles that could prove she was capable of far more than playing beautiful, dangerous women. She mixed smaller and more challenging projects with major Hollywood productions, eventually finding another defining role as Jean Grey and later Phoenix in the X-Men films. She also reached another enormous audience as Lenore Mills in the Taken trilogy. Her private life was less straightforward. Janssen married director Kip Williams in 1995, but they divorced in 2000. She never had children and has generally kept her later relationships away from public attention, even as changes in her appearance repeatedly generated unwanted speculation about cosmetic procedures. Then, in 2013, something far more disturbing happened. Janssen returned to her New York apartment and discovered that someone had apparently entered her home and left a children's book beside her bed. She reported the incident to police, turning what should have been her safest private space into the center of a deeply unsettling mystery. By 2026, at 61 years old, Famke Janssen continues to act, more than 3 decades after Xenia Onatopp first made audiences take notice. She went on to play mutants, mothers, lawyers, and complicated women far removed from Bond. But GoldenEye remains an unavoidable part of her legacy, proving just how difficult it can be to escape the shadow of a character audiences never wanted to forget. Michael Kitchen as Bill Tanner. Bill Tanner had almost none of the action that surrounded James Bond in GoldenEye. As MI6's chief of staff, he largely served as the quiet link between M and 007, the kind of government official who could easily disappear into the background of a film filled with gunfire, explosions, and speeding cars. But at 47, Michael Kitchen made that restraint work in his favor. With little more than his calm delivery and expressive glances, he made Tanner memorable enough to return in The World Is Not Enough 4 years later. Kitchen's greatest recognition, however, came from a very different character. As Detective Chief Superintendent Christopher Foyle in Foyle's War, he found the role that would define the later part of his career and earned him a BAFTA nomination. Yet what makes Kitchen particularly unusual in British entertainment is not simply his acting, but the way he has always lived. He rarely gives personal interviews, avoids the celebrity circuit, and has no public social media presence, maintaining a level of privacy that is increasingly rare for such a recognizable actor. His marriage has been equally private. Kitchen married Rowena Miller, a theatrical dresser, in 1988, and they have 2 sons. For nearly 4 decades, the couple have managed to keep their family life almost entirely outside the public eye. Today, Michael Kitchen is 77 and has largely stepped away from acting. After decades of quietly memorable performances, he now remains almost completely outside the spotlight, ending his career much the same way he lived it, without noise, without celebrity drama, and entirely on his own terms. Samantha Bond as Miss Moneypenny. Sexual harassment in the workplace, 007. With one sharp remark, Samantha Bond immediately showed audiences that this would not be the same Miss Moneypenny they remembered from earlier Bond films. At 33, she refused to play Moneypenny simply as the devoted secretary endlessly waiting for Bond's attention. Instead, she made her modern, intelligent, and perfectly capable of turning his flirtation back on him. Alongside her Bond films, Samantha built an impressive stage career, earning an Olivier Award nomination in 1999, before reaching another enormous television audience as Lady Rosamund Painswick in Downton Abbey. Her private life has been remarkably steady as well. She married fellow actor Alexander Hansen in 1989, and they have 2 children together. More than 35 years later, their marriage remains an unusually enduring partnership in the acting world. But not every chapter was easy. Bond has spoken openly about struggling badly during menopause, describing a period when the physical and emotional effects collided with the pressures of a demanding acting schedule. Then, in 2017, she suffered another deeply personal loss when her father, actor Philip Bond, died at the age of 82. As of 2026, Samantha Bond turns 65 and remains active across British television and theater. More than 30 years after she first put James Bond firmly in his place as Moneypenny, she continues to work steadily, a career built not on one famous role, but on the resilience to keep moving forward through the challenges both on stage and away from it. Izabella Scorupco as Natalia Simonova. For much of Bond history, the Bond girl was there to be rescued or simply to add to 007's charm. Natalia Simonova was different. She was a computer programmer, intelligent and resourceful enough to save Bond rather than simply wait for him to save her. Izabella Scorupco was 25 when she brought Natalia to life, arriving with an unusual background of her own. Born in Poland and raised in Sweden, she had already found success as both a model and pop singer before GoldenEye introduced her to audiences around the world. The success of GoldenEye could easily have opened the door to a full-time Hollywood career, but Scorupco made a very different choice. Just as her international career was taking off, she deliberately slowed down to devote more time to her family. That decision interrupted the momentum that often follows a major Bond film, although she still appeared in several large productions, including Vertical Limit, Reign of Fire, and Exorcist: The Beginning, before gradually stepping further away from Hollywood. Her personal life went through changes of its own. Scorupco has been married 3 times. First to NHL hockey star Mariusz Czerkawski from 1996 to 1998. Then to Jeffrey Raymond from 2003 until their divorce in 2015. In 2019, she married Swedish businessman Carl Rosengren, beginning a new chapter after 2 previous marriages had ended. In 2026, at 56, Izabella Scorupco lives in Los Angeles and has built a life extending well beyond acting. She has explored business interests in beauty and fashion, while maintaining connections with Scandinavian film and television. More than 30 years after GoldenEye, her life reflects a choice she made when Hollywood first came calling: to never allow a successful acting career to become the only thing that defined her. Alan Cumming as Boris Grishenko. Long before becoming one of the most respected and distinctive performers on Broadway and television, Alan Cumming survived a deeply traumatic childhood. He has spoken openly about suffering severe physical and emotional abuse from his father while growing up in Scotland. Those experiences followed him into adulthood, but they also formed part of the remarkable resilience behind a performer who, at 30, turned the eccentric computer programmer Boris Grishenko in GoldenEye into an unforgettable character, with the triumphant cry of "I am invincible," becoming one of the film's most memorable lines. Success, however, did not make his path simple. As an openly bisexual Scottish actor working in an entertainment industry that was far less accepting in the 1990s, Cumming faced prejudices that many of his contemporaries never had to consider. Yet he continued building an unusually diverse career. He played Nightcrawler in X2, X-Men United, earned multiple Emmy nominations as Eli Gold in The Good Wife, and became an acclaimed Broadway performer, most famously through his Tony-winning performance in Cabaret. That willingness to speak openly has never disappeared. In 2023, Cumming revealed that he had returned the OBE he received in 2009. He explained that while he had originally been grateful for the honor, his views had changed as he reflected on the British Empire's history and the treatment of indigenous peoples, making him uncomfortable continuing to hold the award. Cumming has also remained open about his personal life and bisexuality. He married artist Grant Schaffer in 2007, and the couple have built a long-lasting life together without children. Now, Alan Cumming is 61 and remains active across television, theater, and entertainment. More than 3 decades after Boris declared himself invincible, Cumming has endured far more serious battles off-screen and built a career by refusing to hide who he is. Minnie Driver as Irina. Deliberately singing "Stand By Your Man" off-key and out of rhythm for comic effect, that was essentially Minnie Driver's entire job during her brief appearance as nightclub singer Irina in GoldenEye. She was only 25, and few viewers could have imagined that the actress providing a few minutes of comedy would soon become a major Hollywood star. But even as her career took off, Driver discovered that talent did not protect her from Hollywood's obsession with appearance. After earning an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress for Good Will Hunting, she still faced producers and executives who questioned whether she was attractive enough for leading roles. Driver later spoke openly about being told she was not hot enough, revealing the painful contradiction of receiving some of the industry's highest recognition while still being judged by how she looked. Her romantic life brought its own share of heartbreak. Driver dated her Good Will Hunting co-star Matt Damon, but their relationship ended very publicly after Damon appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show and described himself as single. A moment Driver later recalled as deeply painful. In 2001, she became engaged to Josh Brolin, only for the engagement to end a few months later. Then, in 2008, she gave birth to her son, Henry, keeping the identity of his father private for several years before revealing that he was television writer and producer, Timothy J. Leah. Since 2018, Driver has found greater stability with filmmaker Addison O'D. Today, at 56 years old, Minnie Driver remains active in film and television, while also speaking more openly about the difficult experiences behind her Hollywood career. More than 30 years after that deliberately terrible song in GoldenEye, she has long since proved that those few comic minutes were only the beginning of a far bigger story. Tragically, as Defense Minister Dmitry Mishkin. He appeared for only a few minutes, but Defense Minister Dmitry Mishkin required Tragically to carry the authority of a powerful government official watching the system around him begin to collapse. Cario was 42 when he took the role in GoldenEye, by which time he was already an established figure in French cinema. Born in Istanbul into a Sephardic Jewish family and raised in France, he had built his reputation long before Hollywood came calling. His rugged features and distinctive voice proved both an advantage and a limitation internationally. Hollywood frequently saw Cario as the perfect choice for villains, criminals, and dangerous foreign characters, while European cinema offered him far greater dramatic range. His performances in films such as Nikita, Bad Boys, and The Patriot introduced him to international audiences, while decades later, the television series The Missing and its spin-off Baptiste gave him one of the richest roles of his career as the deeply human detective Julien Baptiste. In 2019, that remarkably steady career was interrupted by a serious health scare when Cario underwent heart surgery, forcing him to step away from work while he recovered. His personal life had also gone through changes over the years. After his marriage to actress Anne Canovas ended, he later built a life with actress Valerie Caruzore, with whom he has a daughter. In 2026, at 72, Tragically maintains a much quieter profile than during his busiest international years, choosing his projects more selectively and spending more time with his family. More than 3 decades after his brief appearance in GoldenEye, he remains a familiar face to audiences on both sides of the Atlantic, an actor Hollywood often tried to turn into a villain, but whose finest work proved he was capable of far more. So that's the GoldenEye cast after 31 years. Time has transformed those familiar faces, while some beloved stars are sadly no longer with us. Which actor's transformation surprised you the most? And who was always your favorite? Share your memories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Then and Now stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.